Why is Korea the spiritual Israel? Genesis 10:21-25. Genesis records the beginning and origin of all history, serving as the source of revelation for both the Old and New Testaments. It is also the key to both the Old Testament and the entire Bible. The Bible shows how Adam and Eve, naked, were recreated as God's people, clothed in the white robes of righteousness described in the book of Revelation. Genesis can be broadly divided into two parts. Chapters 1 to 11 describe world history from the beginning to the calling of Abraham, including God's creation, the rise of Satan, the fall of man, God's promise of salvation, and the unfolding of that promise. Chapters 12 to 50 unfold God's history of salvation in earnest, from God's calling of Abraham to the time of the Israelites' sojourn in Egypt. Genesis features 8 distinct figures who illustrate the salvation of God's people through Christ: Adam and Eve, Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. Above all, Genesis 10 contains a record of the origins formed by Noah's descendants. To Shem, the father of all Eber, the elder brother of Japheth, were born children. The sons of Shem were Elam, Ashur, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. The sons of Aram were Uz, Hul, Gether, and Mash. Arphaxad begot Shelah, and Shelah begot Eber. Eber had 2 sons. One was named Peleg, for in his days the earth was divided. Peleg's brother's name was Joktan. This specifically indicates that the lineage of Eber, the grandson of Arphaxad, Shem's 3rd son, was the race chosen by God. Genesis 9:26 states that he is the God of Shem. Looking at the lineage of election, he is the God of Shem, Arphaxad, Shelah, and Eber, the God of the descendants of Peleg, and the God of the descendants of Joktan. The descendants of Joktan, through Abel's lineage, are clearly God's people, divinely chosen. Therefore, the Hebrew people descend from Eber through 2 lineages, Peleg and Joktan. Peleg's descendants are the explicit descendants of God, while the descendants of Joktan are the implicit people of the covenant. In every era, even when apostasy was at its peak, God always left behind a small group of people who held true faith. They are called the remnant, and the Joktan tribe is the remnant of this era. Above all, even after the flood, when they were severely shaken by Nimrod the Hamitic, the Joktan did not give up their faith in God. Therefore, even as they crossed the rugged mountainous terrain, they continued to sing Alirang. Seeking to preserve their monotheistic faith, they embraced the Alirang spirit, a theocentric spirit, and migrated far eastward across the Alirang Pass to Asia in search of a new land. Nimrod is the first tyrant in history to oppose God. Nimrod's name, meaning rebellion or betrayal, signifies the tribe of Peleg, who opposed God. As they migrated eastward, they encountered the plains of Shinar. There, they made bricks, using bitumen instead of stone and mortar instead of clay, and built a city and a tower, settling there. Genesis 1:4 states, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." Thus, the descendants of Peleg migrated eastward, building the Tower of Babel in the west and settling there. However, the Joktan people, the ancestors of Koreans, continued their eastward journey with God while praising Alirang. Therefore, Alirang is a hymn sung continuously by the Joktan people throughout Central Asia and Siberia until they arrived in the east. Therefore, Alirang is a song of our people's history, sublimating the pain of separation and the sorrow of farewell, which our distant ancestors sang endlessly until they settled in this land into a hymn. Above all, Alirang is a song of fervent prayer and appeal to those who followed Nimrod to Babylon in the west, asking them to turn from their rebellious ways and return to God's embrace. Therefore, no song has soothed the sorrows of our people, both in times of joy and sorrow, as much as this song of the Joktan people, the heavenly people. God the Creator created the heavens and the earth in the Garden of Eden in the east. However, after the flood, following the rebellion of mankind and the destruction of the world by water in the time of Noah, the ark came to rest on Mount Ararat in the west. Genesis 8:4. On the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark came to rest on Mount Ararat. Mount Ararat is a mountain in the eastern highlands of Turkey. In Turkish, the word Asan is derived from the word Al. Shem, who inherited monotheism from Noah, named his third son, who inherited it from him, Arphaxad. Furthermore, Joktan, Arphaxad's great-grandson and heir to Semitic monotheism from Eber, named his firstborn son Almodad. Al has been used primarily by Semitic peoples to refer to their gods, a name that has persisted to this day. Jews write El, while Arabs call their god Al. Koreans, in particular, still refer to the creator god as Hanulnim. El, or El, is a variation of this Al, in words like Eol, Al, and Al. Therefore, God is the same God as the one and only God. Our ancestors have worshipped and called Jehovah God since time immemorial. Arirang, sung by the ancestors of the Korean people, descendants of Joktan, as they began their long journey from Mesha to Sephar, is thus a song of the people and the oldest hymn of humanity. Genesis 10:30. Their dwelling place was on the eastern mountain from Mesha to Sephar. Thus, ancient Koreans migrated eastward, passing through the Pamir Plateau, over the Tian Shan Mountains, and over the Altai Mountains. Passing by Lake Baikal, the Korean ancestors continued eastward until they finally reached Baekdu Mountain, the highest and brightest mountain in Eastern Asia, where they established the kingdom of Baekdu. Therefore, they ascended the summit of Baekdu Mountain and offered sacrifices to the Creator God. The hymn sung while crossing such rugged mountainous regions is none other than Arirang. Therefore, the Koreans of the Alrang ethnicity are the sacred descendants of the Semitic people, who inherited their national history through their monotheistic faith, always with God. The people who, after the flood, held monotheistic beliefs and migrated eastward across the mountainous regions to Asia are descendants of Joktan, the second son of Eber and the grandson of Arphaxad, Shem's third son. Genesis 10:21 states, Shem is the father of all the children of Eber. Although Eber was the grandson of Arphaxad, Shem's third son, the Bible specifically mentions Eber first among Shem's descendants, indicating that he was a chosen race. Furthermore, when Eber gave birth to two sons, the earth was divided from that time on. Genesis 10:25 states, And Eber had two sons. He named the one Peleg, for in his days the earth was divided, and the name of Peleg's brother Joktan. Therefore, all the descendants of Eber, the divinely chosen race, included Peleg and Joktan. Among them, Abraham, the sixth generation descendant of Peleg, was called by God and became the covenant people of Israel. However, Genesis 10:30 records only that Joktan's descendants crossed the mountainous region and went to the eastern mountains. Therefore, Joktan's lineage, as a descendant of Eber, was a specially chosen Semitic clan. Therefore, they were a people possessed of knowledge of God and possessed a most steadfast theocratic spirit. Consequently, the Joktan clan reached Baekdu Mountain, the most radiant and highest mountain in the east, and realized it was the optimal location for mountaintop sacrifices, establishing their base there. Furthermore, the highest point in heaven is the Lord's throne. Baekdu Mountain's heaven and earth are the highest in Asia, and the crystal clear waters of life flow from there as rivers. Revelation 22:1-12. Then he showed me a river of the water of life, clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb down the middle of its street. On either side of the river stood the tree of life, bearing 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit each month. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. Furthermore, all the people of heaven are clothed in white, and the people of the Baal people, befitting the white-clad people, all wore white. In this way, Jehovah God exiled the Joktan lineage, the true firstborn of the Semitic race, to Sephar, the easternmost point of the earth, the origin of light, and established a utopia resembling heaven. This is the prototype of the Al-Rang people, the Korean people. They are the few remaining ones who were intended to be restored through the chosen people of the Joktan lineage in the last days. While the Pelagian Jews were fervently worshipping idols, the Joktan Koreans in Eastern Asia were fervently worshipping the one and only God through sacrificial rites. Therefore, not only are our sacrificial ceremonial garments similar to the Levitical garments of the Old Testament, but the linen garments worn by the dead are also like the linen cloths of the book of Revelation. The Joktan tribe, the direct ancestors of Koreans, sang hymns every time they crossed the numerous mountain passes, saying they were crossing them with Al-Rang and with God, and thus advanced in faith. Furthermore, if we consider that Adam originally came from the east, our country is, on a macroscopic scale, the Eastern Eden. Adam's sin led to the perpetuation of sin until the time of Noah. And so, after the flood, the ark rested on Mount Ararat, moving from the east to the west. Furthermore, the wise men of the east must enlighten the Israelites with the gospel. In the Bible, circles represent the Alpha and Omega, symbolizing a return to the beginning. Revelation 1:8, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the one who is and who was and who is to come, the Almighty, says the Lord God. Revelation 1:8, the Alpha is the beginning and the Omega is the end. This must be restored from the beginning. The reason the beginning is cosmic is because Job was a man of the East. He was not only the greatest of the East, but also a righteous man of the East. Job 1:1 and following states, there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. That man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and shunned evil. He was the greatest of all the men of the East. The greatest man of the East is Job. The Bible in one chapter